In sign language.
I know, can't hear you, Sarah. You're talking to Jackie.
Okay, it's recording now. All right, guys, thanks for joining me tonight. If you guys could just give me a quick wave. I see Sarah, Jackie, Jim, and Shirley, so thank you for coming out tonight. Tonight, I'm going to present on the Rolla Public Library, and specifically, we're going to explore organizational theory and practice with 3 key metaphors. I have no notes today because my slides are sufficient. I want to begin with a quote from Abraham Maslow, and it states, "If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail." And that kind of gives us a good idea about why metaphors are important. Metaphors are important because they enrich your sense of what tools are available in an organizational setting. They can improve problem solving for managers, consultants, and workers at all levels. An analysis of the Rolla Public Library shows that the machine, family, and cultural metaphors can enhance an understanding of how the practices of libraries reflect key organizational theories. These theories can be helpful tools if integrated into practice effectively. Some important terms we should define are metaphor, which in this context means how you conceptualize an organization. Theory, which is a rational model that seeks to explain current organizational behavior or which prescribes better behavior for ideal outcomes. Theories can provide helpful tools for workers at all levels, which hopefully you'll see as we progress tonight. And practice, which is simply the observable behavior of operation, or the observable operations of an organization, what you see them doing. We're going to begin by studying the machine metaphor and applying it to the library. Now, the machine metaphor assumes that parts of an organization are like parts of a machine. That is, they're specialized, standardized, replaceable, and predictable. Theories associated with the machine metaphor often have limited application in today's world. However, most scholars acknowledge that they remain at least partially relevant. The scientific theory, as outlined by Frederick Taylor in 1911, is one of the theories most commonly associated with the machine metaphor. According to Taylor in his book, The Principles of Organization, written in 1911, he states the best management is a true science resting upon clearly defined laws, rules, and principles. The fundamental principles of scientific management are applicable to all kinds of human activities. We can kind of summarize, or he kind of summarizes why he values his theory by stating that maximum prosperity can exist only as a result of maximum productivity. Taylor's scientific theory assumes that there is one best way to do every job, that the best way to do any given job maximizes tangible and easily measurable forms of productivity, that maximum productivity can be measured scientifically through time and motion studies, and that satisfactory workers don't innovate, they participate as cogs in the wheel of progress at an optimal rate of efficiency. And he worked during the Industrial Revolution, and so a lot of his ideas are kind of influenced by the time he was in. In certain practices to certain degrees, public libraries represent Taylor's scientific theory. Let's consider the common library task of sorting returned books, DVDs, audiobooks, and CDs. So when it comes to sorting returned items at the Rolla Public Library, there is one best way to handle stacks of returned items. They go to a cart where they are sorted by item type and ordered alphabetically by author, title, and/or series number. Innovation is not required and it's not valued. There's just one right way to do it, and you just do it the right way. Productivity is determined by how quickly the worker processes and executes the steps that are involved in sorting. Only when items are correctly sorted can shelving begin. So you kind of see here that it's a step-by-step process. You're not really innovating on the process, and if you do innovate on the process, it's considered wrong. There's no better way to do it. I mean, maybe there is a better way, but that's, you know, it's a conventional way of doing it, and you're supposed to do it that way. And the productivity is in how fast you can do that process, how fast you can walk through those steps. Taylor's scientific theory is most applicable to the parts of organizational function which require simple processes that produce necessary and measurable tangible results. So we just looked at the machine metaphor, and now we're going to switch gears and look at the family metaphor, which became popular after the machine metaphor. And the family metaphor is associated with the human relations and human resources movements. It assumes that organizations thrive when the needs of workers are fulfilled through their work and overall participation within the organization. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a theory regarding human motivation, became one of the most significant theories for organizations that pursued the organization as a family metaphor. According to Abraham Maslow in his book Motivation and Personality, written in 1954, he states that man is a wanting animal and rarely reaches a state of complete satisfaction except for a short time. As one desire is satisfied, another pops up to take its place. Maslow's hierarchy of needs assumes that humans are goal-oriented creatures driven by healthy urges to fulfill their needs. It also assumes that human needs fit into 5 categories, and those categories are physiological needs, which would include food and water, sleep, and sensory gratification. The second level of needs would be safety needs, including security against environmental threats. The third grouping of needs would be affiliation needs, so this would be your belonging needs, the giving and receiving human affection that comes along with interpersonal relationships. The fourth grouping of needs would be the esteem needs. So that would be the gaining a sense of external and internal achievement. So when we think of achievement, you have your external achievement, which is what you can show people. And then your internal achievement is how you feel about what you did. So it's an internal sense. And then you have the fifth grouping, which is the self-actualization needs. And this is just about you becoming an internal, or it's about you becoming everything you can be. So who you are on the inside, it's coming out and it's being expressed more because you can more freely do that. That's the self-actualization needs. Now, another important assumption of Maslow's theory is that needs are organized into a hierarchy because basic needs, like the physiological needs, have to be fulfilled before you can address the higher level needs. So in his theory, you don't really address the higher level needs until you have the more basic needs fulfilled first. Public libraries are consistent with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, given that they provide workers with monetary compensation, which can be used to fulfill basic needs, and provide room for social interaction, and provide workers with rewarding and challenging work that relates to areas of their interest. It's a lot different than the scientific theory, because with the scientific theory, social interaction is actually pretty much seen as a bad thing. It's seen as getting in the way. The machine theory is not one. It emphasizes the machinery of producing. The family metaphor is more the structure of how you're participating, and it needs to have not just like the basic things. You have to also be, the participation in the organization has to be fulfilling the social needs and the, bringing yourself into your work. Those are important aspects to the family metaphor theory. Maslow's hierarchy of needs can be effectively used to help structure organizational participation in a way that's meaningful for workers at all levels. When participants at all levels are having their needs fulfilled through participation, they have a greater stake in the organization's success and will invest themselves into the organization's well-being. So we just looked at the family metaphor, and now we're going to look at the cultural metaphor, which sees the organization as being, or as representing values, people, events, important things that define who the group is as in terms of stories, usually. What is culture? You hear the word all the time, but what does it mean? Well, it means, or researchers anyway, see culture as the emerging and sometimes fragmented values, practices, narratives, or stories, and artifacts that make a particular organization what it is. During the 1980s, 2 authors named Terrence and Allan Kennedy wrote Corporate Cultures, which created the strong cultures model for American companies. The abstract principles which they discuss can apply well to many different types of organizations, including nonprofits like libraries. Terrence and Allan Kennedy write in their book that companies or nonprofits, I added that have cultivated their individual identities by shaping values, making heroes, spelling out rites and rituals, and acknowledging the cultural network have an edge. And the thing with public libraries is they also need an edge. I know that this book is written for basically corporate America, where competition is a given, but competition is important really for any nonprofits. You tend to see hostility even to the idea that there's competition, but really with any kind of public institution is competing, even if you're competing with, different things people can be doing. People could be sitting at home and watching TV, or they can be sitting, they can be choosing to do a lot of things with their time. Nonprofits are asking people usually for at least their time and sometimes even their money. And so we're really thinking about the situation in terms of competition to some degree. It has its benefits. So when you have a culture that's distinctly defined and that's strong, it gives the organization an edge that they need when they're trying to compete against all the other things that people could be doing. Deal and Kennedy's strong cultures model assumes that culture has 4 underlying pillars. Those pillars are values, so that's the first pillar. The second pillar is a shared mythology or history with heroic figures. So this is really about branding. Rites and rituals, so things that define what is participation in the group. It's not just showing up. There are certain rites and rituals, and if you pass those, then it's kind of signaling that you're participating. And then communication networks. So we're going to see how this kind of applies at a library level. And at the Rolla Public Library, staff members join for a meeting every quarter to discuss library business. This can be considered a ritual or rite of passage because it's something where you're not obligated to do it, but it's kind of seen as if you're really participating, you're going to come to it, kind of a thing. You know, I mean, obviously there's times when people miss and that's fine, but it's kind of a rite of passage. It's something special that you do, and it kind of signals participation. During these meetings, values are reiterated and consideration is given to how organizational behavior aligns with values. So you can see how values are playing a role here. The meeting is held in the Leola Miller section of the library, and this has significance to the library's mythology or the history, given that Miller was a significant librarian who is seen as representing many of the values which continue to guide the organization. So she was an important figure historically, and of course, when we say mythology, people think, well, that means fake. Well, I mean, and what Terrence and Deal and Kennedy are using the word mythology basically to dramatize history is really what they're doing. It's a branding thing. Miller was a significant librarian, so she is an important person in the story, and the fact that we're having it in that section of the library kind of emphasizes the values, and these things kind of relate to each other, as you can kind of see. And then the meeting provides a platform for quality discussion, so it serves as a communication network, but also it sets the stage for productive forms of informal communication to take place between the director and other staff members after the meeting is over. So not only is it functioning as a communication network, but it's also setting the stage for more productive forms of informal communication later, you know, directly one-on-one with the director or directly between certain individuals who work together within the organization. Deal and Kennedy's strong cultures model suggests that culture is intertwined with organizational function. Nurturing a healthy organization means integrating values with practice, sharing and disseminating the mythology of the organization, defining rites of passage that signal participation, and setting the stage for healthy forms of communication within the organization. So what we discussed, and so what we, just to kind of preview it, or to kind of summarize it, is we discussed the machine metaphor, its relationship to Taylor's scientific theory and how this theory is reflected in practice through sorting returned library items. We discussed the family metaphor, its relationship to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we saw how this theory is reflected through work activity. We also looked at the cultural metaphor, its relationship to Deal and Kennedy's model of strong cultures, and how this theory is reflected in some of the library's communication strategies. So to kind of bring it all back together, metaphors enrich your sense of what tools are available in an organizational setting. They improve problem solving for managers, consultants, and workers at all levels. Additionally, metaphors help researchers tie powerful theories to effective practices. Thus, scholars enrich their thinking of organizational function using metaphor. And we saw that an analysis of the Rolla Public Library shows that the machine, family, and cultural metaphors enhance an understanding of how libraries function and how theoretical tools can be applied to actual practices. So with that, I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight. I really enjoyed it. And this is my reference page. So if you would like to pause the video and see where I was getting all this information from, you can do so. And thanks for joining me tonight. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.